I learned a lot of things in sports. I learned a lot about leadership and the good qualities that some leaders have and some not so good qualities that other leaders have, whether it was coaches or teammates or things like that. And so I want to say that was really my first exposure to how one could sort of have influence on another human being, be it positive or negative.
In this episode, I get to speak with Brock Richard. He's the host of the Sharpen Your Sword podcast. He's an avid guitar enthusiast and loves to entertain by singing along. Brock is also obsessed with the power of the mind, and that is why on his podcast, he dives into the experiences, mindsets, and wisdom cultivated by his guests. He's skilled in time management, leadership, customer service, and social media. He works at one of the most celebrated and rising fitness companies, enabling thousands of folks to stay fit from within the safety of their homes at Peloton, which certainly saw a huge boost in 2020. Brock earned his Bachelor of Science focused on kinesiology and exercise science from Arizona State University. Let's dive into this episode and learn a bit more about Brock Richard. Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. We're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. Hey, Brock, thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Absolutely, Junaid. It's a pleasure to connect with you again. It's been a minute, and I'm happy to see where this goes.
Yeah, man. So we've been connected through Unconventional Leaders. We've hung out in a lot of coffee chats. Ton of fun. Lots of deep work, brain work and mental work and spiritual. You know, it's been really uplifting for sure. Helped me open up. Helped me in one way or another. It's made me more comfortable about who I am and the mistakes that I'm making. So I was like, Brock's doing some cool stuff there. Let's bring him on and learn a little bit about you. So how did you get started with the podcast, and where did where did it all originate from?
Where did the podcast originate from?
Where did you come from?
Oh, man. So I was born in Peoria, Illinois. Funny enough, I live in Arizona, and there's a Peoria here as well. So I was really
Oh
confused when
wow.
I was moving out here. But to back up, yeah, born in Peoria. Shortly after, I moved to a tiny town outside of St. Louis called Union,
Mhm.
Missouri, and spent most of my younger and formative years there. Got really into sports and baseball and trying some other different sports as well. Played
Mhm.
around in basketball for a little bit. So sports was always a passion for me growing up. But when I was 12, to fast forward, I moved out here to Phoenix, specifically Cave Creek. Basically, my parents
Mhm.
had followed my aunt and uncle, and my grandma had moved out here. My parents are a little bit older, so they were just tired of shoveling snow and doing all that fun stuff that you got to do back in the Midwest. And so, yeah, they just kind of were more on the retirement side of things and wanting to move to an area that was more weather friendly, I guess,
Mhm.
although it is very hot out here. So,
It's too hot.
yeah, but back to the sports stuff. I mean, I grew up playing a lot of different sports. I skateboarded for several years. Hockey is kind of my main thing now.
Mhm.
But I'm just trying to think how I can lead this into how the podcast got started. So, I learned a lot of things in sports. I learned a lot about leadership and, the good qualities that some leaders have and some not so good qualities that other
Mhm.
leaders have, whether it was coaches or teammates or things like that. And so
Yeah.
I want to say that was really my first exposure to how one could sort of have influence on another human being, be it positive or negative. And
Mhm.
so that became really, really interesting to me. But I was always looking to improve in ways physically, whether it be my performance in sports or whether it be, my passion for skateboarding and learning new tricks and
Mhm.
whatnot. And I became really passionate about that stuff, just being consistently motivated to better myself in any and
Yeah.
all areas. But I never really thought to consider like the mental game or the mindset side of things. And so
Mm-hmm.
a few years back, I was actually, so let's back up a little bit. After sports and being not so involved with that anymore, I started to get into physical fitness. I spoke to the physical aspect of these things and just wanting to improve. So I was really, really skinny growing up. And I'm by no means like bulky now, but I really wanted to see what kind of milestones I could reach in that realm. Because that's always what I was all about, was just reaching that next milestone. But it was always
Mm-hmm.
physical. So I got really into fitness. And with that, there's a dude by the name of Steve Cook who I started following in the fitness industry. And as a result of following him, I saw that he had been on a podcast, and this podcast happened to be the School of Greatness from Lewis Howes. So that was my first introduction to podcasts. And I fell in love and I just started listening to a bunch of other guests that Lewis had on his podcast because it was
Yeah.
athletes, it was, business owners, it was authors, it was entrepreneurs, it was, you know, people who had achieved greatness, right, on some level. And so I started to just
Yeah.
take note of some of the habits, some of the strategies that people had implemented in order to get them to where they are today. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started to see where I could kind of pick and choose certain traits and qualities and just better myself in any way possible. And that's really where the mindset stuff started to click for me. There was only so much, physical discipline that I could have to,
Yeah.
achieve a certain physique or whatever it was that I was going for in the fitness realm without really taking care of myself upstairs. So I got to a point in my life where I was in amazing shape. Like I was just absolutely dialed in as far as my
Mm-hmm.
diet went, as far as my fitness regimen went. I was working out 6 days a week and sometimes twice in one day. I was all about it. I was dialed in, I was committed, and I was chasing after a certain physique. But I started to realize I was not in a good place mentally. And I was just always chasing after the next thing. And it was just this
Mm-hmm.
empty sort of feeling that I was always having as I was chasing towards this seemingly impossible goals. Like I could never get big enough, or I could never like put on enough muscle, or my appearance was never what I wanted it to be. And I realized that had a lot more to do with, the mental side of things. And I really started to dive
Yeah.
into that. And that was really where podcasts and some of these people that I started to discover, like Joe Dispenza, Brene Brown, Tim Ferriss, like I could go down the list for hours of people that have been
Yeah.
influential to me in that realm on my journey. But, so that was really my initial exposure to podcasts. And obviously that opened up a whole nother realm of books that I wanted to read, other podcasts that I wanted to listen to, other hosts of podcasts that I wanted to listen to. And I really just
Mm-hmm.
started to the point that I made earlier, just pick and choose different traits and qualities and things that I could apply to my own life as I saw it fit and as I saw it
Yeah.
relevant in a way that was going to make me a better person altogether and be more well rounded, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint. And so, that said, podcasts really had a big influence on me, as well as books and some other things that I've mentioned. But
Mm-hmm.
I started to ask myself if I could see myself doing something like that. And it started to become really exciting and interesting to me, even as somebody who never really saw myself being, quote unquote, good at public speaking. I just knew it was
Mm-hmm.
something that it was exciting to me. It was interesting to me. And I knew if I just got myself into it, that I would get better at it. Just like, anything that we give the time of day, we're going to get better over time. And so
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of belief in myself at first because I was always really shy growing up. But I just
Mm-hmm.
knew with, facing that fear and just allowing myself to fall on my face at first, which it really didn't go so bad. We have our fair share of ums
Mm-hmm.
and uhs and, and these phrases that we're throwing around to fill in the gaps and whatnot. But it's interesting to hear
Definitely.
yourself back and improve on that over time. And so I basically sat on the idea of launching a podcast for about 2 years, I want to say, before I actually gave it the time of day. And
Wow.
I worked for Nike for several years, and this isn't a bash on the company or anything, but I really wasn't making near enough money to invest in the audio equipment. Like, yeah, I know you can start a podcast for pretty cheap, but I'm the type of person who's a perfectionist, and I want it to sound good, and I want it to look good, and I want it to be as
Yeah.
shiny as possible. And I knew what I wanted as far as equipment
Hmm.
goes when I wanted to get into something like this. And so fast forward, after 4.5 years of working at Nike, they decided they were going to close our store, and
Mm.
I was going to pursue another position within the company. But I just decided, like, you know what, as corny as this is to say, I was like, this is just a door closing and another one opening. And so I got a severance package, and I used a lot of that money to invest in the audio equipment that I wanted and finally get this podcast off the ground. And so backtracking again, having realized the influence that podcasts had on me and my mentality and my mindset and my general outlook on life, being somebody who is generally like pretty pessimistic and negative, to really being able to see, the silver lining and the bright side of things. And, it's things aren't so bad if you're looking for it, right? And so, um, yeah, I just started to really consider the impact that podcasts and some of these people have had on me, and I just wanted to be able to do that for other people. And so that's really the foundation that the podcast was built on. It's called Sharpen Your Sword, by the way, and sword being interchangeable with whatever it is, be it your health, be it your fitness, be it your mindset, your leadership skills, your communication skills, whatever the guest that I'm having on can bring to the table, as well as my own personal insights as well. And so I've had a lot of fun with that. I've been on a little bit of an unplanned break with the podcast, but I'm going to be ramping it up here in the next couple weeks again. So very excited about that. So that was a very long-winded answer, and hopefully I didn't bounce around too much, but that's a
No, man,
little it's a
that's
little bit of what got me to where I am with the podcast today.
no, that's really awesome because I see a lot of patterns of sports and building up your own mental or your own physical because, and it also depends on the leadership, right? The leadership of the people that you're around, the coaches and whatnot, because they teach you or they tell you a certain thing that you should need to be good at, and so as young people, as that we are, we go in that direction because that's what the coach is saying, and every once in a while you it's like no, 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 I want to do it my way, and then you get some flack back from either the coach or the other players, and like, well, just get in line kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting to see that. And then what what really made me curious is you focus on the physical aspect of it, and the reason you were working the 6 days of the week, working out 6 days a week, is because you're trying to fill a hole with
Hmm.
something that's not fitting. It's like you're trying to put a square cog in a round
Yeah.
hole kind of thing. Like it's not gonna fit. It has its own place, but for this round cog spot, you need something that's also that's gonna fit. And as human beings, we have so many different dimensions, right? We are intellectual, we're spiritual, we're physical, we have emotions. It's just so many different levels of dimensions. So it's certainly very important to be able to cover all, be a more balanced person. So really awesome to see that that's what helps you, go out and seek those answers. And you wouldn't have been introduced to Lewis House if you were not following that athlete,
Exactly.
right? And this is probably the second or the third time that I've been told about Lewis House, and I haven't heard of him yet. I haven't heard his podcast yet. Um, really cool stuff, man. The School of Greatness is it?
Yeah. Hmm.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, and so really well said, man, honestly. And if I can just touch very briefly on the fact that,
Yeah.
I'm not here to like bash people's pursuit of their own physical appearance. I think that's really, really important. And I want to be very, very clear about that. I think that can do a lot for one's confidence, for one's belief in themselves, the way that people show up if they're able to get themselves in really, really good physical shape. But for me, it was just never enough. And so
Mm,
I had to really have that awareness to realize I was just chasing something that I was ultimately never going to achieve, no matter how
right.
great I looked in the mirror. And so that was just a
Mm,
really, really important self awareness that I had to come to the realization of, and then start to work on, some of those limiting beliefs, some of the insecurity that I had that was still deep rooted. And so
yeah.
that was just a really, really key part in that whole journey was, yeah, I was in great shape, but that wasn't the end all be all. And so
Mm,
there were other swords that need to be sharpened, if you will. So
yeah. Nice. I like it. I like it. Really cool, man. So, what kept you motivated? So, how long did you do the podcast for? And you said, like you said, unplanned break, which is totally acceptable this time of COVID, post COVID life, or, we're still in COVID, but
yeah.
what keeps you going on being able to connect and just keep going that down that path of, sharpening those swords?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've been doing the podcast a little bit over a year. I actually haven't put out an episode in about 3 months now. And why I
Mm,
actually took this unplanned break was just really running into some health challenges that I was in and out of the doctor around. Fortunately, everything is all good, which is why I'm trying to
awesome.
refocus and get things back,
Yeah.
get back on the saddle, if you will. But what keeps me motivated to stay connected and keep going with it is just how interesting it is to me that there are as many worlds as there are people in the world, right? Everybody
Yeah,
has their
man.
own unique perspective, everybody has their own unique and fine-tuned lens in which they view the world through, or they view other
Yeah.
people through, or they view themselves through, or they have different beliefs based on how they were raised, and um, ultimately what they think they're here to do and what's got them to the point that they are based on all the hardships, on all the good things that have happened to them as well. And so I just really, really enjoy connecting with people on that level and looking
Yeah.
for all the unique differences, but also looking for the parallels. And that's where I'm really trying to get as close to, these capital T truths that we hear about,
Mm,
in the personal development and the self-help space. You start to see all these congruences, these
mm,
parallels, as I said before,
yeah.
things that seem to be relevant across the board for a bunch of different people, whether it's different authors, different podcast hosts, different
Yeah.
athletes, different business owners, just seeing all of these things that sort of line up and being like, okay, maybe there's something there that I should really apply to my own life and see how it
Yeah.
can um, improve my own quality of life, and also those who decide to tune into the podcast. So I think that's what
Yeah.
keeps me motivated to connect, is just it's that desire too. Like, we as humans, we want to connect, we want to relate, we want to understand each other, we want to be on the same page as much as we can.
Yeah.
There's a place for healthy conflict and challenging other people's beliefs, which I think is really important. If we're just constantly in an echo chamber of people who have the same beliefs as us and we're never being challenged, then it's really, really hard for us to grow and to be able to adopt different beliefs and mentalities and perspectives and
Hmm.
see how that can ultimately improve our life beyond what we may have been aware of previously. And so I think that's the coolest thing for me, is just this constant journey of learning and seeing what else
Yeah.
is out there that may not have um, been discovered had I not decided to have a conversation or connect with this person. So it's just it's this passion to turn over as many rocks as possible and see what would have never been brought to my awareness had I not decided
Yeah.
to read this book or connect with this person or have this conversation or ask this question. So
Yeah,
it's curiosity more than anything, I think. And so
I
it just
agree. I
makes it
mean,
really fun.
it does, and podcasting has been a huge bridge for me at least. And what I'm hearing from you is, be able to connect with people either like-minded or, not even like-minded, but you see those patterns, you see those parallels, you see the struggles are very, they're as unique as the person themselves, but then there's so many parallels between our worlds and their worlds,
Hmm.
and it's just so powerful.
Well, what's really cool is I think that's what becomes the most impactful thing for us is when we're listening to a podcast or we're reading a book or any other form of media or content. The more that we can see ourselves in somebody else, the more we find that to be impactful. Like, oh wow, this person dealt with that exact same thing, like, and it makes you feel that much more connected. It makes you feel like less of a loner on your path to whatever it is that you're trying to create. And so that's what's really, really cool for me is especially getting, a message from some random person in the UK who happened to find my podcast because he was looking for, some mindset stuff, and he tells me that he binged all of my episodes and he feels like he's in a much better place mentally. Like that's what it's all about,
That
when
is,
somebody
yeah.
can really take things away from the stuff that you're putting out there and apply it to their own life. And much like I said, that's what I've been able to do as a result of discovering these different people in this space. I just wanted to be able to share that with others as well.
No, absolutely. And the more the more I the more I go down this rabbit hole of podcasting and meeting people and connecting with them, the more articulate and the more curious and more, there's another word, creative I get with my thoughts
Hmm.
too, because it just gives me that many more connections to connect a dot to so many different ways. Like just earlier today, I was talking to someone, and he's telling me his story, his journey, and then why he quit his job, and now he's got a business, and all of the things that he's doing. It's to, he's got a business around it, but I was like, you're doing all of those things because you wanted to solve a problem for yourself. He's like, you're absolutely right. I did it because I wanted to solve a problem for myself, and now if I can help others also with, solving that same problem, then, why not?
Hmm.
Why not make it happen? So that's been pretty recurring, and that I could start seeing. I was like, dude, it's almost like we've cut from the same cloth, and we're just like two different in two different areas of the world, but we have so many similar passions, similar thought processes, and what we like to do with our time, and like building computers or playing video games, or going out and cycling. Like there's so many parallels that you can find with people, and I think the more you talk about a specific thing that we love to do, the more deeper that bond becomes too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. So talking about podcasting, podcasting has been so powerful, and it's grown. Like the number of podcasts that are out and available right now,
Yep.
just in the past 90 days, that number has, like, if I were to see a chart, a growth chart of podcasts coming into life, it's it's almost like, I don't even know the type of the chart you would call it, but it's upward moving exponentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, well, not everybody, a lot of people have been stuck at home and whatnot and trying to find
Yeah,
something productive to
yeah,
put their energy towards. And so I think it's great. It definitely
it is.
makes the space more saturated, but I think the more people that are willing to put their voice out there, like that's just what we
Hmm.
need right now.
Yeah,
We don't need silence. We need people sharing their thoughts and their perspectives. And exactly that, just their thoughts and their beliefs
Mm,
on whatever's going on or whatever topic of interest they're wanting to talk about or dive into. There's
yeah.
going to be somebody out there who is going to find value in that. And so, for us to sit here and be like, oh, like, it's too saturated and nobody's really going to listen to this, and it's just like, no. And
Hmm.
it shouldn't be about that either. It's if one person
No.
can find something valuable, like the person in the UK that I mentioned,
Yeah.
then I feel like I can hang my hat on that. I still want to keep going, and I still want to keep producing, and I still want to keep
Yeah.
growing and creating. But to have somebody reach out to you and send you a message such as that, like, to me, that's just what it's all about.
Agreed. Agreed. And one thing that I've also noticed is listening to podcasts or doing a podcast episode almost becomes like a therapy session,
Hmm.
which you don't have to pay for.
Yep. Absolutely, man.
It's so releasing. Like it's such an awesome feeling to be able to do that because and you can't and what's that you can't do that with everybody, or maybe you can. I don't know. I haven't. I mean, it's almost felt like no, it can't be everybody that you can open up and on a deeper level unless you can see yourself in the other person.
Hmm.
Like you see a mirror image, or you see the struggles, you see uh, that frequency matching, the brain frequency matching. Because I've had some guests where I've had to pull teeth.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, so can you talk more about it? Like, yeah, it's been some good experience for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's so cool about being in, a group like Unconventional Leaders is it's like, there's probably very few people in there not going to be relate to, that I'm not going to be able to relate to, at least on some
Mm,
level,
yeah,
whether it be somebody else whose work they enjoy following, some common interest. And so,
yeah.
it's like everybody in there is just trying to, you know, put themselves out there, create something, or make some kind of a difference at the end of the day. And I
Mm,
think that's just what gives us a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning and a sense of,
yeah,
you know, like what we're doing is worth our energy, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Cool, man. Well, we talked about some really cool stuff. Your origin story and how um, listening to Lewis House and a lot of these other, Tim Ferriss is one of my go-to podcasts, and there's some fun ones that started last year, like Ron Burgundy podcast.
Mm,
It's funny. There's some really good information, like he's bringing experts and whatnot, and I was able to connect a lot of dots from that too, where every night that we go to sleep, our brain shrinks down and basically excreting all these toxins from your brain, which then those toxins go to your bladder, and that's why you have to get up in the middle of the night to go use the restroom. Like, why did I have to
yeah.
go use the restroom? What's going on? And you're technically getting a brainwash, and that's what they tell you, to drink lots of water before you go to sleep, so there's enough water to clean your brain. And that I learned that on Ron Burgundy podcast.
No way. Okay, I thought you were going to
It's
go
just
into Tim Ferriss with that one, but
no,
that's
no, that was
crazy.
Ron Burgundy all over it,
Amazing.
because he brought in an expert, brain expert, intelligence expert around the brain, and then Tim Ferriss got to learn, about Jordan Gordon Levitt's story and how he started, um, hit record, and the whole story behind it. So there's so much positive out there. We don't really need to watch news.
Hmm.
Sure, you have to do your duty and make sure you go out and vote and do the rightful thing that you're supposed to be doing as a citizen. But it doesn't mean you need to consume negativity, because the more dirt you put in, the more dirt's going to come out,
Hmm.
right? So I think finding those positive stories, finding those positive energies, and connecting with like minded people is only going to help you become a better human being.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. All right. So before we get into some of these awesome questions, we're going to take a quick break and be right back after these messages. Welcome back. We are here. We've got some really cool journey questions and the motivations behind the podcast, motivation behind leveling up the mindset with Brock Richards here. But we got some fun questions.
Let's do it.
So, what is the one hobby that you wish you got into?
What is the one hobby I wish I got into? While I'm thinking about that, I don't know if there's anything that's coming immediately to mind because
Mm,
I've dipped my toes in a lot of different things over the years, right? Like basically anything that piques my interest, like I'm going to at
yeah.
least give it a little bit of time to see if it's something that I want to actually invest in and put a lot of energy into.
Mm,
But with that said, I started playing guitar when I was like 11 or 12. And I pretty
nice.
consistently played for, I'd say like 3 to 4 years. Started to get pretty decent, started to learn a few songs and whatnot. My
Mm,
technique was not great because I taught myself. So there was definitely a lot of room for improvement there. But then I started to really get more into skateboarding. And I was
mm,
really trying to pursue that for a long time. And fast forward to last year, I was going through some really challenging things, and guitar quickly became my outlet again. But that was after, like, I want to say right around 8 years of not
mm,
playing at all. And so,
yeah.
going through some challenging things, like guitar was the one thing that really like grounded me in the present moment and really just allowed me to take my mind off of whatever else was going on and just learn a song
Mm,
or write my own riffs or whatever it may be. And so basically for the last year and a half now, like I haven't really gone a day without at least like picking up my guitar for a couple minutes. And so that's something that I've become really, really passionate about.
nice.
Um, over the last year and a half again, and it's one of those things where it's like I really wish I never stopped playing. And it's, things happened the way they did and we can't change it, and so that's fine. But it's
Yeah.
definitely hard to not have those thoughts about like, damn, I wish I never quit playing, or I could have been so much better by now had I not stopped
Mm,
playing. And so it's definitely, like I said, hard to not have that conversation with yourself. But if
yeah.
you'll allow me to answer the question in that way, I think that's the best.
No, I think that
That's the
works.
best thing that's coming up right now is just wishing I had never stopped
Stop
playing,
playing guitar.
because yeah, I'm a pretty decent player now. Again, I have some technical things that need improvement, but
Mm,
um, yeah, it's hard not to think about how much better I could be had I not stopped playing. And so yeah,
I
that's
think
how I'll answer that one.
I think a lot of the reasons that we stop doing one thing or another is because of uh, the surrounding that we are in. Because playing a guitar is more, it's more solo. It's more of a solo act unless you're part of a
Yes.
band. Then you become group.
Hmm.
Skateboarding is more of a group activity. You want to hang out with group of kids. You can do skateboarding because you're going out. Unless if you had found a band to play, keep playing the guitar with, who knows? You'd be the next Bono.
Yeah.
Although he sings more than anything. Um,
That's a really, really good
uh,
point because, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Skateboarding was something that I could go out and do with friends, and I didn't really
yeah.
have any other friends at the time who were playing guitar. When I first started playing, I did, but we kind of went our separate ways, and then I started to meet new
Yeah.
people and just got into skateboarding, and that was just the thing to do. And like guitar almost no longer became like cool, like
Mm,
we're 12, 13, 14, and we just want to fit in
yeah.
and like do what's cool and whatnot. And so yeah, I think that's a really good point and a really good quote unquote reason that I stopped playing or that I really ignored it for such a long time was, to your point,
Yeah.
it was a solo journey, and it was, something that I would have had to invest time in by myself, and that's what I do now, and I'm
Mm,
perfectly okay with that. But
yeah.
back when we were in middle school and high school, we just want to hang out with our friends and do whatever they're
Yes.
doing. And so yeah, I think that's definitely a valid way in which that um all that unfolded.
Nice, nice, nice. All right. Next question. What is your favorite movie or TV show?
What is my favorite movie or TV show? I'm not a big movie person. Like, I'm that person where, everybody's talking about this movie and I'm like, oh, I haven't seen that one. And people are like, what? Like, you haven't seen that movie? And I'm like, no, I haven't. I don't know. I just don't really give movies the time of day. And um, I guess I just always felt like my energy was better invested elsewhere. Not that there's anything wrong with kicking back and enjoying a movie.
No,
I have my
absolutely.
own vices, but um, TV shows were definitely something that I got into a little bit more. And with that said, I can't not say The Office. Such a classic. It never fails to make me laugh. Um,
Yeah.
it's definitely one of those shows where if I'm having a tough time or I had a tough day or whatever, I can always fire up an episode of The Office and find myself at least giggling a time or two. And so yeah, I just think
Nice. No,
it's
The
a good
Office is,
storyline. It's great comedy, and yeah, it's always something that I can fall back on.
yeah. No, The Office is great. It's great. I mean, I, I could almost say I had some experiences like The Office, but not nearly as close because it all comes down to I think the type of business that business was
Hmm.
versus the business that I was in. But there's a lot of there's a lot of parallels that you'll find also.
Yeah.
All right, next question. I know you said you don't really watch a lot of movies, but what movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it? And if not a movie, how about a book?
Hmm. It's really tough for me to pick out a character in a book because most of what I read is nonfiction.
It's all nonfiction,
Um,
yeah.
Man, to pick out a character in a movie to play, I will say Captain America was pretty sick, and I really enjoyed
Yes.
that one. I think the Marvel stuff is always pretty cool. I do
Yeah.
enjoy those movies. I can't tell you about the timeline and put everything together. I've only seen a handful of movies here and there, but
Sure.
that's probably one of the more quote unquote recent ones I saw. Even though like I think it was Winter Soldier or something that's probably like 5 years old now or something, or maybe more. I
Yeah,
tend to have a
yeah.
really bad concept of time when it comes to movies, but it's funny when you sit down and you see something like that, this character is just
Mm,
badass and whatnot. You're like, man,
yeah,
that's so cool. So
yeah.
yeah, if I had to pick one right now, there's probably a better one if I sat and thought about this a little bit longer. But yeah, we'll go with Captain America for now, especially since I was chasing that physique for a long
The
time.
physique, the perfection. Yes, that makes so much sense. That lines up with your mindset. And the next question is pretty simple. Who's your favorite superhero?
My favorite superhero. I know we just talked about Captain America, but
Yeah,
I've got to go with Batman, the Dark Knight, man.
The Dark Knight, no doubt. Man,
That's just
there's so
badassery
much
at its
depth.
finest.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. Oh man. All right, here comes the last
Okay.
question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
If I were a board game, what an interesting question.
And I've had people answer with being card games. I'm like,
Mm,
that's not technically a board game, but I'll let it pass because there are a lot more card games that are popular than board games.
yeah. Yeah, I'm out here
So
like,
much
am I
easier to
allowed to
play.
Google board games right now? um, I think, it's like I want to say Monopoly, but if I just think about
Mm,
how that applies to me as a person, like it doesn't
mhm.
necessarily. I can't
Yeah,
really see, like I played my fair share of Monopoly growing up, but
yeah,
oh man, what board game would I be? Does Scrabble count?
of course.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with Scrabble because growing up, I was always really good at spelling. I won a
Hmm.
couple spelling bees in my very early years, and so
Nice.
yeah, I always had fun playing Scrabble, and even playing with my parents as a pretty young child. I
Hmm.
secured a few victories in that game. So, and then when
Nice.
Words with Friends came out, I was playing that a good bit, like the
Yeah,
digital version of Scrabble, pretty much. So, yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna go with for now.
nice. I like it. Scrabble is an awesome game. My kids love it. Um, they'll play it as long as they're able to until the 2-year-old comes and flips the
Yep.
board. um, it's pretty epic. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a fun conversation. We got to learn a little bit more about you, where you're at, what you're doing, going future, and the entire reasoning behind why you start a podcast. Because it's true, we all want to sharpen a sword that's in our mind that we are either seeing around, like other people are showing off their swords, like, dude, my marketing is on point, or my automation, or all of these things, and you're like, how do I get to that level?
Yeah.
And yes, it's really important to keep growing in that aspect. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah,
What?
absolutely. And if you don't mind, I just want to leave people with this. It's that, in this pursuit of becoming, the best version of ourselves, as that phrase gets thrown out a lot, it's very, very easy to get caught up in comparison and seeing how we're measuring up to the next person, and
Yeah.
chasing this personal development journey from a sense of lack, rather than like, we're amazing as we are, loving ourselves as
Mm,
we are, but also just acknowledging that there is room for improvement. And that just is what
yeah.
it is. And there's always going to be room for improvement. And as somebody who's always been chasing perfection, it's just something that you're never going to be able to achieve at the end of the day, mainly because perfection is totally subjective. What Junaid thinks is perfect is not what Brock thinks is perfect, is not what, you know, Steve Cook or
Hmm.
Lewis Howes thinks is perfect, for example.
Yeah.
So, I would just advise anybody who's just trying to better themselves to not do it from a place of lack, and as if there's something missing, or there's something that you need to complete, or there's a loop that you need to close or something. Like, yeah, we all have
Yeah.
our own healing and improvement that, either quote unquote needs to be done or we desire to
Hmm.
um, do. But yeah, it's just really, really important to really come from the place of just wanting to better yourself and not feeling as if you're lacking anything or missing
Liking
anything.
anything. Yeah. No, I love it. Thank you so much, Brock. And where can my audience find you?
Yeah, definitely add me on Facebook. I think I'm just facebook.com/Brock Evan Richard. And then I'm on Instagram more than anything else. And that is
Yeah.
at Brock Richard with an underscore. And yeah, that's where I hang out the most. And obviously, my podcast, Sharpen Your Sword, it's on iTunes, Spotify, and most other places that you can find podcasts. Again, I'm getting that back up and running in the next week or two. I'm not sure when this episode
Nice.
is going to launch, but hopefully by the time people tune in, then I'm back up and running, and maybe I'm having you on as a guest as well. So
Nice.
looking forward to that.
Appreciate it. Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. Have an awesome one.
You as well, brother. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Hacks and Hobbies. You can find additional information on the guest today on their website, hacksandhobbies.com. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on upcoming interviews with amazing guests.